Hello, my name is Steve Schneider, and I'm with the University of Arizona Global Campus. I want to welcome everybody and let you know, as you probably already know, that I want to talk about systems thinking. Now, I've been practicing this for a lot of years, but I still have a lot more to learn, just as pretty much everybody who's involved in systems does, because we're finding more and more what we can do with it, and in finding better ways of using the system's tools. So what we're going to explore are the benefits of kind of going beyond traditional linear thinking in order to reveal hidden patterns and connections. I know it sounds a little ominous, um, but these connections when solving problems. And by the end, you're going to understand the key concepts of systems thinking and have some tools to apply them in your personal and professional lives. Also, you're going to find out, what is it beyond the obvious? Okay. Um, some of the learning objectives are first to define systems, define system, just what a system is, define systems thinking, uh, and why it matters, for tackling complex, interconnected challenges. Um, the You're going to learn to recognize systems in their basic elements and identify uh, key components of systems, like parts, relationships, boundaries, purpose, and distinguish a system from a collection of unrelated elements. So uh, it takes kind of looking at things a different way, if you're not used to this, more holistic way, and in terms of the relationships that are within a system. We'll talk more about that. So I'm going to ask you to try to shift your perspectives and challenge your assumptions, um, and uh, you're going to be able to then see what other people miss. And you're going to do that by questioning your own mental models, exploring um, multiple stakeholder perspectives or the parts of a system, and identifying leverage points for change, recognizing patterns and anticipating unintended consequences. So I hope this gets you to think about your own thinking or metacognition, uh, because that's going to help you to monitor your own thinking and opportunities for developing better or new ways to approach problems. So let's get started with systems are formed when people or things, they're called elements within a system, when they work together. So the outcome of a group of elements is often vastly different than what one element does individually. So, if you say A causes B, well, yeah, that's a linear way of thinking, and sometimes it does, but what if when A and B uh, uh, affect each other, they cause a third element to happen, which then is going to affect the system. So it's it's a whole different way of looking at this than in linear than traditional or linear thinking. Now, Dr. Derek Cabrera of Cornell University explained that systems thinking really is based in four basic rules. And these rules are the basis for practically all forms of thinking and methodologies related to systems. There's the distinction rule. So any idea or thing can be distinguished from any other ideas or things. Maybe a little simple, but it's important. Then there's the systems rule. Any idea or thing can be split into parts or lumped into a whole. And then there's the relationships rule. Any idea or thing can relate to other things or ideas. This is very, very, very important in systems. And then there's the perspectives rule. Anything or idea can be the point or the view of a perspective. So there's a lot more wiggle room within systems, if you want to call it that. Now I want to just talk to you about the journey of a systemically challenged person. Me. My journey to become a systems thinker really began with a lot of roadblocks and detours and a lot of frustration. I mean, I was systemically challenged, but I was fortunate enough to find a really great mentor and teacher, Gene Bellinger. When I met him, I became optimistically apprehensive. Gene helped me find ways to remove the roadblocks that kept me from developing the systemic perspective that I needed. Learning how to think systemically was difficult until I could relate the material to my own work in the context of how they're applied. So take it slow. Look, if you're new to systems thinking, and in this presentation, I started presenting models and causal loops and simulations and a lot of other big words, you'd most likely be lost. And I wouldn't expect anything different, which is why, we're keeping things a little simple, because when I began my journey, trying to absorb everything I read was really difficult, primarily because I just didn't understand what I was reading. I wasn't even sure what questions to ask. I finally learned it was unrealistic to think that I needed to know everything all at once. Any change that requires how we view the world, how we view our work, and how we relate to others can create resistance. It takes time to learn anything new. And really, practitioners and organizations generally are committed to their current practices and need to be shown the effectiveness of systems thinking. Well, I was optimistically apprehensive for a little while, and then I started feeling rejection and dejection. I had to be convinced, and still it was hard for that to happen, that systems thinking was a better approach than what I had been using for many years. I mean, why would someone want to study a topic that's conceptually unfamiliar with terminology, that's not understood? Well, the reason is that the benefits really do outweigh the difficulties. So by choice or by need, the world is becoming more interdependent. And experience really has taught me that changing a long-held theoretical belief is not a simple task. So, and our world is interconnected and fairly complex. So, as a result, we need to move beyond fragmented ways of thinking which look at problems in isolation or focus on short-term solutions. So let's break this down by first describing what do we mean by system. Generally, a system is thought of as a group of interconnected, interdependent elements that are organized for a function, for the same function or purpose. System elements or parts, they can be physical, or they can be intangible, but system parts are interdependent. A change in one element can produce change within the entire system. That's because they relate to each other. There's a relationship. This also means that systems are non-linear. So when consequences occur, they're not isolated. They kind of ripple through the whole system. Almost anything can be a system or a subsystem, like the human body, like cities, governments, social networks. All of it can be. And on the next slide, there is an example. So what we have here is a chair. And a chair consists of legs, arms, and a seat. Together, the parts function to keep a person off the floor. But separate, they're useless. For a chair to work, all components must be present and configured in a particular way. So if one part is missing or not in the right place, the person is going to fall on the floor. So systems thinking it kind of shows you a chair as a system. Well, systems thinking is a holistic approach to understanding how different parts of a system interact, how they influence one another, and how they create patterns or outcomes over time. So rather than analyzing components in isolation, systems thinking focuses on the interconnections, on the feedback loops, and we're going to define all that, and the broader context that shapes the behavior of the whole system. So there are complementary approaches for understanding and analyzing complex phenomena. First being systems thinking. And so systems thinking, and some people even call it metacognition, is a higher order thinking. It's thinking about thinking, knowing about knowing, and awareness of one's awareness. But it's really important. It's a universal process for gaining a more fluid and contextualized understanding of both physical, physical and even spiritual realms. Systems thinking views phenomena as integrated wholes, emphasizing relationships, interdependencies, and the behaviors that emerge from the interaction of parts within the broader context. So when you have these interdependencies, you may not know just what's going to come out of that. You know what each part is, but how they relate. Systems systems can take care of themselves. And this slide is one of my favorite pictures. It's the painting, A Sunday on Le Grand Jacques by George Seurat. And what it does is it illustrates a system very well. If you were to stand close enough to the picture, you would see only dots of paint. But if you step back, those same dots would combine to form images of people, hats, umbrellas, and dogs and trees. The systems approach sees patterns within and between systems. People wear hats and carry umbrellas, but dogs don't. Just thought I would point that out. And this picture always, I don't get inspired a lot by art. This I did. And I just love this picture, and I'm glad that I can use that to point out what is a system. Okay, now we're on to the other complementary approach for understanding complex phenomena, linear thinking. Linear thinking, or reductionism, breaks down complex phenomena into their smallest, simplest components, and it analyzes each part in isolation. And the assumption is that understanding the parts is going to explain the behavior of the whole. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about systems thinking or holistic thinking and linear thinking or reductionism, look at them as two competing ways of thinking, but they're not. They are actually they're complementary to each other, and we need them both. So systems thinking and linear thinking are two contrasting approaches for understanding and analyzing complex phenomena. And the important thing here is to understand that they are complementary approaches. Now, when you're dealing with very complex problems, this is where systems thinking really comes into play. But both are used. All right, let's take a look at some of the skills you needed for seeing the non-obvious. First thing is adaptation. You kind of need to suspend your beliefs for a second, especially when you first learn it, and adapt to the understanding that to develop critical thinking or critical systems thinking habits, you need to anticipate unintended consequences, being able to do that, and question assumptions. A lot of times, we don't do that in linear thinking. So what do I mean by develop critical thinking, critical systems thinking habits? Well, there are, and I've got handouts that I can send to you about what are everyday systems thinking skills that you can use in your personal life. Things like looking at things as a whole. And actually, I've got some examples that I want to give you in just a couple minutes here. But it's developing the systems thinking habits. And when you do that, you start anticipating unintended consequences, so you can do something about that. Before we go too much farther, let's talk about some terms that you need to know. And don't worry about memorizing them. If you do any reading, any reading on basic systems thinking, these will come up. And the first one is feedback loops. Feedback is one of the major concepts in systems thinking. So instead of saying that that A only affects B, we recognize that if A leads to an effect on B, B will also have an effect on A. That's a feedback loop, talking to each other. So when there are many elements interacting, the result is many causes and effects. And so feedback is just like you would think the word is being used. It gives information. Each part gives information to the other. Leverage points is another. And this basically is just strategic places where interventions can lead to significant changes in the system's behavior. And then we have archetypes. There's an archetype is a recurring generic character, and we're going to talk about one in particular, or a symbol or a story that in systems thinking it is recurring, and they're found in many kind of organizations. So it's almost like an umbrella, where you can say, like we're going to be talking about the addiction archetype when we talk about organizational systems thinking in organizations. And it just gives you a good idea of the basic characteristics, of what that archetype is and what to look for. And finally, a mental model. And this is basically how things start out. Mental model is just a kind of simplified representation of how something works in the world. So it's an idea that you may have. And there are thinking tools or frameworks that allow people to simulate the functioning of a system, and helps you navigate various aspects of life and work and learning more effectively. And I know there's some presentations on this, on mental models, that you may want to go to. So now we're going to be, now we can go on, since you have a basic idea of some of the aids. Okay. So we're going to take a look at breaking the cycle of organizational addiction. I'm going to start by asking a question. Why hasn't systems thinking been adopted by more individuals, by more teams, by more organizations? And I think one of the reasons is understanding systems thinking can be kind of challenging. And when you're starting out, and many individuals and organizations struggle with the concept, and partly due to interconnected relationships that define complex systems. And every so often, in the world of business, you see an enterprise that, after years of steady progress and growth, they suddenly experience kind of a drastic decline. Now, most organizations do adapt to new situations, but sometimes managers become addicted to old ways of operating and making decisions, and the result then is decline. So let's take a look at the systems within these organizations using the addiction archetype that we talked about. Remember, archetype refers to a recurring generic systemic structures. They're found in a lot of different kinds of organizations. And so the addiction archetype is then a recurring pattern where a system becomes real dependent on short-term solutions instead of addressing a deeper underlying problem. And I'll give you specific examples. And in systems thinking, we see then that there's a reliance on a quick fix. That's the addictive behavior, which replaces addressing an underlying problem. And over time, what happens? The addiction becomes the central issue. So this can apply to substances like alcohol and drugs, behaviors, or even relationships. So I want to really look at what does this look like so it can be identified. So what does the addiction archetype look like? Well, in substance addiction, the drug temporarily relieves discomfort. And over time, using the drug damages health, leads to stronger dependence. While the root cause, trauma or stress, is left unattended. Organizations, again, the dependency is on quick fixes, but it reduces the group's capacity to solve problems independently. So the addiction archetype is self-reinforcing. So the more you rely on it and the quick fixes, the harder it is to break free and address the core problems. Sometimes, as I said before, the addiction archetype, and I know it sounds like I'm personifying this, but in a sense, this makes it easier to understand. Sometimes the addiction archetype is built into the larger systems, and again, it keeps the organization almost keep holding it hostage, but it becomes very, very difficult to break out of it. So what you have is, and the parallels are quite striking between substance use and organizations. What you have in addiction, where both become what is brought in as a solution, the drugs to the substance user, or maybe a consultant or subsidies to an organization, becomes the solution until it's no longer the solution. It becomes a problem, and then they have to do something about that. Okay, so we just kind of scratched the surface. Everything is a system, and the more you learn, the more dynamic your work is going to be as you're able to apply more and more of systems thinking tools. Take time to understand the complexity of all systems. A quick solution can create a lot more problems than in the long run. And before taking before taking any action to change the outcome of a system, try to anticipate unintended consequences. Um, just being aware of the possibility is going to help. So I've got a question. Uh, just what is beyond the obvious? If you said the Twilight Zone, you wouldn't be wrong, but the correct answer is connections and patterns and relationships, things that traditional linear thinking um, uh, doesn't really deal with, and that's why systems is so important. Um, and this is the last slide. Well, we covered quite a bit, but there's still quite a bit more to know. I really hope that you start to think systemically and want to keep on learning. So I put together an annotated resource handout. And if you'd like a copy, please send me an email to Stephen.Schneider at faculty.uagc.edu. Should be in my profile, but it's my university email. And I will be happy to send the resources to you. And if you have any other questions, please, just ask. So thank you so much for attending.